Hello guys, welcome to another video in the agent architecture technical series. So I've covered configuration, resilience, LLM, connections, tools, agents, and section. Now, this is how it all comes together. Today, I'm going to explore the service layer, the API design. This is going to be like a bit of a longer video session and a trace complete request. I'm going to show you how when a client sends the request, how it comes into the API layer, into the service layer, into the tool selection, the agent layer, and as the request return back to the client side. So I'm going to show you like a layer responsibility, the child service dive deep dive, the API layer, a complete request flow, and error handling in practice. So, when we are talking about the service layer, the service layer actually sits between. I'm going to switch to the code so that I could explain this better. Now, we are talking about the service layer. So, the service layer sits between the API and infrastructure and the infrastructure. So it contains a business logic and orchestrate complex operations. So why not put this logic in API endpoint? Three reasons. First, reusability. So like if I'm gonna put all this business logic right in the endpoint, this is not gonna be like a good idea. Uh, Business logic and service could be reused from different API endpoints, even from background jobs or other services. So like secondly, testability. So services are easier to test than API endpoint. So at the service layer, I'm not gonna make like a HTTP mocking needed. HTTP mocking that is not needed at the service layer, and separation of concern too, because API handles HTTP specific details. So service should handle like a business logic. So infrastructures handles data assets and clean boundaries. So each service has a clear responsibility. Let's take a look at example of this chat service. Looking at here, take a look at this. I designed this as a singleton because this is the chat service that I built. So uh, when you look at first, I initialize once and use throughout the life cycle of the application. So the chat method is where everything happens. And let me walk you through here. If you look at here in this code, right? I'm accepting some parameter here. I accept a message, user ID, session ID, provider, model, and metadata, the metadata. So the metadata, if you look at the provider and the models are optional, if not provided, it's a fallback to the default, right? So they're optional. So I'm trying to get the LLM or here trying to get a conversation history here. So if you look at the code is well documented and self-explanatory. So the first thing I undo session creation. If no session ID, I create one. This enable like a stateless request to become useful conversations. The next thing is I get the LLM. This is where the dynamic provider selection happens. So take note that the section factory convert the same provider's name to instance. So this validates the models and return the configured LLM, which we've talked about before, and that happens here. Um, uh, so yes, section factory, because I'm trying to initialize from the constructor. So now uh, the then if you look at it, there is I execute the agent with the message and the context, which is this line, right? And when I execute the message, uh, the agent might use to, so agents could make a multiple LLM calls, so or implement a complex reasoning. So finally, I store the conversation, both user message and the agent response goes into the session storage for future context. So the method orchestrates 5 different subsystems: the session, LLMs, agents, tool, and storage. But the code is clean because like each subsystem has a clear interface. So if you look at here, this is where I'm trying to get the agent. This is where I'm trying to get the LLM. This is where I'm trying to get the existing session history, and I still provide that as a context to the uh, why executing. And when I got the response, I save it. Save the assistant, save the user message. And this is just trying to check if it is a WebSocket. But for now, I'm using REST. I'm not using a WebSocket, so I'm going to change it to REST later. So if you look at the service layer benefit, it provides different several advantages. So it enabled me to be able to test the service independently, and changing to business logic only require update to service. So this should not affect the API endpoint. And then the transaction management, which is the service can manage complex and multi-step operation with proper error handling. Now, let's talk about API that I expose for this functionality. So, looking at it, these are different API that I expose. The auth, the chat session, LLM, injection, and this is to check the status of the API. If you look at the API body, it's simple and clear. And take note, I may decide not to use try and catch here and still try to use annotation for the error handling, which will even make it to be more simpler. Maybe I could just have only this and put an annotation to catch based on different kind of exception handling that I have spoken about. So you could also notice that the endpoint is simple. It validates request, call service, return response. Look at it. Uh, it's called the external service. And it await the external service here. This is where I initialize the external service. Then I return the response. This is just a simple. No, and also if you look at the error handling, it converts the service exception to appropriate HTTP response. So I'm going to show you that now. So if you look at the error handling here, whenever you return all this, I have like a global exception handler here that I've explained in the past. This will handle different kind of error and try to, even when you return it, it will return it into the right format. And this is the request schema that I have in the application. I'm just trying to see, because if you look at the request here, I'm using chat message. I'm just trying to explain it. And looking at the complete flow. Here is a request flow through the system. A client send message to the to this integrated point, to this endpoint. As soon as I receive the message, the FastAPI receive the request, validate against the chat schema, because If you go into here, there are some sort of a validation here. And when such a validation, there is a violation of a constraint defined in this Pydantic, the exception will properly manage it and display the right response. Look at it, authenticate middleware, verify GWT tokens, load user. So because if you look at here, I say depends on get current user. This is the middleware, right? If you come to the API dependencies, agent API dependencies, I think I've rearranged, but if you check it, you're gonna see the dependencies in the application. Let me try to search for the dependencies. Uh-huh. I have some documentation, co-exception, dependencies. It's in the core, right? Look at it. This is in the core aspect of the application. You see, in the core here, you see, this is where I'm trying to, you see the dependency in the security. I'm getting the current user. So just trying to explain to you guys. So if you look at here, the endpoint handle, the endpoint handler extracted request data. The service layer chat is called with parameters, right? Just like what we have here. Chat service. I'm gonna open this chat service so that you guys will see it. This is the chat service, right? The chat service has a chat which is trying to extract all these parameter, right? So I still have some cleanup I'm going to do before we push this to the GitHub. So the LLM factory create and retrieve LLM provider instance. Agent factory create agent with LLM. So this is, if you look at what is happening at the service layer from the request. So, and this is the details request flow diagram. You send the request, hello, deploy my app to production. That is if you have that functionality built into it. As I told you, this is not just conversational RAG alone. This is not just a RAG application that just question and answer. It could perform some functions. You're gonna see it in the final video where I'm going to try to demonstrate this. The first API middleware. So this is I'm trying to explain what is going on behind the scene, right? Tool execution if needed. If there is need for tools to execute it, catch a response formatting, and then the client will receive it. And if you look at the error path, the LLM provide a field. So this is the path that the error actually follows through. So this is another endpoint that lists the provider of the LLM. Take for example, it is also a secure endpoint. And how is it getting this provider? Is getting it from LLM service, right? If you look at LLM service, also getting it from where? It's getting it from settings. Because if you get to settings and settings.llm, if I say setting.llm, right, this is going to give me like everything in the settings. Let me open it. Settings.llm, this is going to give me everything here because I already have different model version for the provider set there. So here, I just try to return it as an endpoint. You could get provider by name, and these are different ways to handle the exception in the application. You could dive deep into it. and I provide some documentation. There is a Swagger API for the endpoint as well. For all the exposed endpoints, we have a Swagger documentation for each OpenAI documentation. I mean, we have a not OpenAI document. Sorry about that. We have a Swagger documentation that you have access to, and I try to put in details comment into it. And apart from that, one most important thing is I have a conversational sign up, which I'm going to demonstrate to you guys, uh, so that you understand how the conversational sign up works. So it's going to be in the next video. I'm going to show you guys, because in that next video, I think that's where I'm going to talk about this and show you the real application, how it works. Yeah, thank you.